Alright, now as you can tell, we're driving. We're operating a motor vehicle. You might be asking yourself two questions. One, why are we driving? Two, why are you driving with an engine in your trunk? Well, I have the answers to both, just as soon as I make this maneuver. As you can imagine, because I'm showing you this footage, the answers to those two questions are actually one and the same. And the answer is, I was wrong. It happens. Last week I told you that I have precision measuring instruments. That's correct. I do have precision measuring instruments. What's not correct is that I don't have precision measuring instruments that are of the adequate size to measure the cylinder bores on my M54 engine block, which is annoying. You need an inside micrometer to measure the bores of the cylinder, and you need an outside micrometer to measure the piston. My inside micrometer is far too large, and my outside micrometer is far too small. Which just sucks! But, you know, it is what it is. And, like, I could buy correct tools. Like, that is an option that I was considering, but the tools are really expensive. And, yeah, I mean, I'm probably going to rebuild another engine or two, but, like, I don't know. I just don't really want to buy them at the moment. And so, because, well, the M54 in its completely disassembled state without a crankshaft or pistons or anything like that is, I don't know, only about 25 kilograms. I just put it into the trunk of my car and we're going to go see a man at a machine shop who does have the correct tools. And he's going to measure for us the cylinder bores. Now, from the factory, BMW specifies that the cylinder bores have to be 84 millimeters in diameter. It's a perfect cylinder, and it goes down all the way. Over time, because the motion of a piston is not directly up and down, it's really more like, you know, in a reciprocal way, you tend to experience some wear. So the cylinders both kind of become a little bit larger and sometimes take on a conical shape, which is not desired. Your piston rings then kind of lose their ability to seal the cylinder properly. I'm not really concerned that the engine is too out of spec, but I want to make sure. It costs a lot of time to rebuild an engine, and, well, the parts aren't cheap either. So if I can do something to give myself a little bit of peace of mind that I'm not going to have to do this again, at least not for a very long time, I'm going to do it. I don't think that that's unreasonable. That's it. We'll see you there.
Cool.
I was particularly optimistic when I walked in because I saw more than one BMW engine at the machine shop. The man there, in his turn, was pretty optimistic with how my engine measured. However, this data is incomplete. The friendly man at the machine shop was in a bit of a hurry, so he took 18 separate measurements of the lateral diameter. To get an accurate picture of conicity, though, one needs an additional 18 separate measurements along the longitudinal plane. Still, this information was encouraging.
Right, so I think we can proceed. Now what we need to do is we need to make sure that we have our clearances right on our main bearings. And for that, we need main bearings. These main bearings are made by a company called Glyco. Glyco makes main bearings for many OEMs. They may have even made them for this engine. I don't know. I bought this set of main bearings from my new friends at BMW World, who sent me a really lovely message and wished me well. Further good news is that BMW World was able to hook me up with a wide variety of parts that I paid for with my own money with no discount, which is fine because, like, I just bought them. Like, I don't expect discounts just for being an idiot on the internet. Anyway, let's proceed. First thing we need to do is we need to clean off these bearing ledges. God damn it! Fuck. Remember how I said that the 6th main bearing is a thrust bearing and, well, it's special? This includes it, but I also bought it from BMW and it was not cheap. So, how are we going to check that the bearings that we got are the right clearance? Well, the answer is quite simple. Very carefully. And also, with this. This is called plastic gauge. It's plastic and it's a gauge. If you're curious about how it works, I'm about to show you. That's what this channel is. Me showing you stuff. We need to put in the new crankshaft bearings. And the way that they install is very simple. There's a tab here. That tab goes in there. And the lower ones always have this oil groove in it. Okay, now that the bearing shells have been installed, we need to clean them. Now, what we need to do is we need to reinstall the crankshaft. Okay, now that the crankshaft is reinstalled, what we need to do is we need to apply the plastic gauge. There we go. Plastic gauge equipped on every one of the journals. Let's go. Let's get to installing it. I'm gonna put my gloves back on. This is why you keep your old main cap bearing bolts. Let's see, number one. Let's get a bearing. Line up the 2 notches on this end. Pop it in place. Just make sure that it's clean. 2 notches go onto the 1 notch, so there's really only one way that this bearing cap can go in. Line it up. Number 2, bearing shell in. And finally, number 7. Now that all the caps have been installed, let's torque them down and check the spec. Everything has now been torqued, which means it's time to take it all off again and see how we did. Somebody gave me the tip to just use these as kind of leverage to wiggle them out. Thanks for that. All right. Let's see what we got. Here is our measuring dingus. Here are our dinguses to be measured. So it's definitely not 0.76 because it's wider than that. It's even perhaps wider than 0.51. Definitely not as wide as 0.38. Cylinder 2, wider than 0.51, not as wide as 0.38. Same here. 4 seems to have stuck on the bearing instead of the journal. That's a pass. That's a pass. Plastic gauge is not an exact measurement, right? But the service manual says that there must be between 0.02 and 0.058 millimeters of crankshaft bearing clearance. All of these seem to be in that range. Plastic gauge replaces extremely expensive and very time-consuming measurements, just to give you an idea. Unless you think that I'm being cheap. No, literally, plastic gauge is what the BMW repair manual says to use. So yeah, this is a good engine block. We have good clearances. We have the right main cap bearings. Now it's time to clean the crankshaft, clean the bearings, install them, do the same torque tightening sequence again, but now with the new bolts, and then we will be done with the main bearings. Let's begin cleaning. It's very important that you get all of it out, because otherwise it's not going to be good. You don't want the plastic gauge on your actual journals. Brand new bolts from BMW. The one trouble is that these bolts do come from the factory like lubed up, and for some reason the manual says to undo that. So you do have to give them a bit of a wipe down before you put them into the engine. All right, it's time to torque. Okay, that is the main bearings properly done.
No, it f***ing isn't. I'll chalk it up to this week being ridiculous, but about 15 seconds after I made this salacious claim, I realized that I forgot to center the crankshaft in the thrust bearing, forgot to properly oil the bearings in the bearing journals, and didn't check axial play of the crankshaft.
I hate making mistakes. I mean, obviously, most people would probably agree with that, you know, no one likes making mistakes. I really hate making mistakes when they cost me $149. These are stretch bolts, as are most bolts that have this much responsibility in an engine. They are one-time use bolts. They are stretch bolts. Just, what a fucking idiot. Okay, well, I can see we're not going to get the crankshaft in fully.
There was some good news though. While I would have to redo much of the work on the crankshaft main bearings, I tested the engine block for straightness, and it passed with flying colors.
Well, that's good news. The block is good. There's a lot more mass on a block, so it tends not to warp as much. So I'm not really that concerned about the block, but it tests good. I'm so frustrated with myself. I can't believe I didn't read the instructions. It's gonna be all right. Let's move to the pistons.
More bad news followed, however. BMW specifies piston width as a value with 3 decimal points, which means that ideally you'd want to use a tool that can go to an accuracy of 4 decimal points to measure it. As mentioned earlier, my micrometer was too small to fit around the piston, so I tried to use my calipers, but I quickly realized why nobody uses calipers for measuring pistons. Calipers are just not nearly precise enough, nor do mine go past 2 decimal places. So that was a bust as well.
There, that's a better angle. So let's do a quick review. The cylinder bores, they're within specification. The crankshaft clearance is correct. We are all set to proceed with that. And while I don't have empirical data to back this up, I am making a judgment call to say that the pistons are good. Everything else in this engine is good. Everything that the pistons touch is good. Obviously, we're going to replace all the rings. I wish I had time for that this week. But that actually brings me into my next point. Honestly, this week has not been kind to me. And just to be clear, I'm not looking for sympathy. Like, I know what I'm getting myself into. I knew what I was getting myself into when I bought as many BMWs as I have. However, just to make sure that, like, there will be a Sam to continue doing these things, I'm just going to go ahead and put it out right now that, like, at some point, I might have to hit pause. Anyway, that's going to be it for this episode. Big thank you for you if you've made it this far. And, well, if not, then thanks anyway. And of course, despite everything and despite the morose outlook that I may manifest today, I'm still very thankful for my Patreon subscribers. These kind people right here. They do a big part in making this channel happen. If you want to join them, like, there's a free option. You can do it. And of course, take a look at Instagram for all of the latest goings on. Admittedly, this week has been slow. So that's that. My name is Sam. This is the Gray Lady. That's $145 that I'll never get back. And this is Skelly's Garage. We'll see you next week.